As I mentioned, I want to talk about the story that I saw. And as you read it, it's unbelievable. Well, the Madison School District having lost students, so they're losing students with proficiency rates in reading and math around 37% and ACT scores that keep going down. They're losing students. They need more money. 8.5% tax hike is what the Madison School Board says it needs in order to keep people getting raises and all of this high quality education at sub 40% proficiency. This with Tony Evers' tax increase as a backdrop, $325 per student every year for 400 years. So $325 this year, another $325 next year, an additional $325 the year after that in perpetuity, plus a lawsuit in the offing that demands unlimited dollars for education. Will Flanders from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty joins me on the program to talk about this. 8.5% increase is pretty intense, especially given the massive amount of money Tony Evers just gave the school board in taxing authority.
Yeah, there's just seemingly no end, right? From every angle, there's a demand for more funding. And I think what's even more important to note about this is this isn't something that was approved for new construction or we're updating facilities. This is just basic operating funding in general. They're looking to do some things with teacher pay. This essentially is saying that the district cannot continue to operate or meet its basic functions without this additional funding. And for a district that's over $22,000 per student, the second highest funded large-scale district in the state, just behind Milwaukee, it's pretty absurd to think that they're making the argument they can't even continue to meet their basic obligations without raising taxes even further on Madison residents.
Well, that sounds like Milwaukee, doesn't it? That's what Milwaukee says every year. We just can't meet our basic obligations. They spend over $1 billion in Milwaukee, around $25,000 per student, for even worse results than Madison. But Madison is spending $22,000 per student already, and we are getting proficiency. Now, put aside the cut score change, we're getting proficiency that suggests the entire system in Madison is an abject failure. When I say sub 40%, you're talking about somewhere around 37% of kids proficient in reading and math, 37, and I'm using pre-cut score changes, 37% proficiency in any subject, 4th grade, 8th grade, whatever, 10th grade, 4th grade, 10th grade. And they can't do it for 22 grand? What are they spending their money on?
Yeah, even if you use the post-cut score stuff, which unfortunately we're going to increasingly just be in the environment of, because that's the only data trends we have at this point, we're still under 50% proficiency, even on these absurd new cut scores. We're at 47% proficiency. So, the real numbers were in the 30s. With the new fake news numbers, we're still below 50%. So even if you want to use those new numbers, the majority of kids aren't living up to expectations in Madison. You can see a lot of districts that spend significantly less money that are getting significantly better results. And it's not as if Madison is dealing, there are some demographic challenges in Madison, but it's not to the level of Milwaukee. Yet proficiency doesn't look hugely different than it does in this district.
Nope. Doesn't look hugely different than Milwaukee, especially for black kids. Doesn't look hugely different from the a school district that is considered one of the 10 worst in the country, which is Milwaukee. So you said they have demographic challenges. They've imported their demographic challenges. Madison schools have asked for the demographic challenges. They have openly advertised in Chicago for the Chicago population to come into Madison. So they do maybe have some additional demographic challenges, around 15%. That they didn't have in the past. It was more around, 5%, 7%. They're asking for it, but they're spending $22,000 per student with fewer students. So every single year, Madison loses population, and it does to open enrollment or just population decline. And so they get more money every year with fewer students to have to educate. So why can't they meet their obligations?
Yeah, and you'd think for one of the few areas of the state that is sort of experiencing at least stable population or population growth, that they'd be able to maintain their enrollment. But actually, Madison is one of the biggest senders to neighboring school districts in open enrollment. So that just tells you that parents don't think for that $22,000 they're getting a great education. McFarland, one of the largest receivers of open enrollment students in the entire state, some of the other districts as well. So they're spending more than some of these neighboring districts, even though you think those suburban districts might be more financially better off. Madison is spending more, yet parents are choosing to send their kids out of the district in many instances. Again, another signal from parents themselves that they don't think what they're getting there is meeting expectations. And guess what? Spending more money, raising property taxes further, only going to drive more people out if they can leave, and it's not going to lead to any better results, from years and years of data across the country.
But you shouldn't force people out of their homes because they can't afford their taxes. So we just had the big property tax hit, that 400-year property tax we keep talking about. That just hit the state of Wisconsin. I think the statewide average was around 8%. I personally know someone in Dane County who had a property tax bill double because of a reassessment and because of the property tax increase under Tony Evers. So we're talking already big property tax increases. Most people, mine in Jefferson County was 17%. Statewide, it was around 8%. Don't know what it was in Madison, but it wasn't small. So you're going to add another 8% plus the next increase, because next year the school board will be able to increase spending even more. So I mean, there's like this endless increasing pot of money because of this veto. And it seems to me that you can plan because you've got a guaranteed increased pot of money as long as you maintain enrollment.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And according to the cap times, the increase last year on average in Madison was 20.4% in the property tax levy. So just an absurd amount of increase last year. And yeah, year after year, we're building on top of it. Now you can blame local voters to some extent for approving these referenda that are leading these increases. But I think, one, it's difficult for people to perceive, how much this is actually going to cost them in the long run. It's monopoly money when people are thinking about evaluating these referenda in some instances. And, additionally, it's incumbent on school boards, obviously, to exercise some level of control of their spending. And we're certainly not seeing that in Madison.
Okay, so let's talk about the idea that, you're trapping people in costs they can't afford. And not everybody can move. You think, well, just move. Well, that's not a choice. Afford it or move? That's not really a choice you're giving someone. You're forcing someone out of their house if they can afford to move.
The ones that suffer the most are the ones that can't afford to move. Yeah, the ones that suffer the most are the ones that can't afford to move. Yeah.
Correct. So there are people who literally can't afford to move because it is expensive to move. We have high interest rates. We have high housing prices. It is expensive to move. So maybe you're thinking, well, maybe we can have some more choice schools or something like that, at least to try to give us a relief valve on the bad performance. But no, you've got, and school choice schools are what are in large way is kind of a ratcheting down of costs in education. Gwen Moore and Mark Pocan want to eliminate school choice entirely at the federal level. So anything we can use right now to maybe contain some costs are not going to be available if these guys are successful.
Yeah, that's right. There's a new proposal from our lovely left wing, I should say, Congress people in Wisconsin to end the federal school choice tax credit that was contained in the big, beautiful bill. So for anyone who's not familiar, we have had a lot of discussion around the state around this, but essentially this is a tax credit. No taxpayer funding is used. It's a tax credit that allows folks to get funding towards private schools, but also towards other educational environments. It could be supplemental services for a public school as well. And just like we've seen from Governor Evers, who's rejected this funding for the state because of the chance that private school kids could benefit, here we're seeing Congressman Moore and Pocan essentially trying to end this benefit for kids in Wisconsin and around the country merely because private school kids could benefit. And this should outrage even liberals, because we see demands constantly, as we've just discussed, for more funding. Here's a free source of more funding for not only private schools, but for public schools as well. And they don't want anyone to have access to it because private schools could potentially benefit in addition. So it's better no one benefits than private schools. We should talk about the private
schools. Let's talk about the private schools in Wisconsin, who we have a legal school choice program allowing taxpayer money to be used for a student to attend a private school. How are they doing? Number one, we should get out of the box, say they can't cream the crop. They can't be selective, the private schools, if they're participating in the statewide school choice program. But how are those schools performing compared to the public schools, the traditional public schools, Will?
Yeah, so there's ample evidence that we've put out and from sources, university-based peer-reviewed studies over the decade that have showed these schools get a better result for a lower taxpayer cost. And we're actually going to have some new data I'll preview with new student-level data, sort of replicating what was done back in the early 2000s that hopefully will be out in a peer-reviewed journal in the next couple of months. It's going to show a similar thing with much newer data. So the evidence in Wisconsin is very definitive. These schools get better outcomes, and they don't cream the crop. They deal with the students that sign up, and oftentimes those kids are those that are actually behind in school because those are the families that are seeking more options. So pretty comprehensive, definitive evidence these kids are doing better at a lower cost to taxpayers.
Yeah, and the discipline problems are not as prevalent in the choice schools in Wisconsin. Better outcomes, better reading proficiency, better math proficiency, better placement in college, better successes in the workforce for about $10,000 less per student if you're looking at the high-spending districts like Milwaukee or Madison, for about $10,000 less. More difficult challenges to educate because kids who are further behind, those are the ones whose parents tend to choose these schools because now they can afford to. But no, we don't want to promote that in our state. We don't even want to do it modestly with a tax credit. And in fact, if you look at that lawsuit wants to shut down the broad statewide school choice program entirely. That's the lawsuit that wants unlimited funding for K-12. For what?
Yeah, that's right.
For what?
The lawsuit.
People need to start asking for what, because the proficiency stinks.
Yeah, the law. They're attacking it from all angles. The lawsuit is one potential angle to bring it to end. We'll end the federal tax credit with Moore and Tocan's bill, and then if that doesn't work, we see most of the gubernatorial candidates on one side of the aisle are saying that they want to bring school choice to an end. Only exceptions, by the way, are some of the folks that are from Milwaukee who have large constituencies that are using these programs and see the benefits every day. They're the only ones that are equivocating at all on that. So that should be instructive. But multiple angles, school choice is under attack from the left.
Yeah, not a single Democrat is saying these proficiency scores are terrible. We have to do something about this. We got to teach these kids to read. Not a single one of them cares about that. Not a single one of them. The Milwaukee candidates, by the way, aren't exactly going out and beating the streets for school choice, though. They're just not saying they want to see it attacked, but they're not beating the streets for it. The rest of the Democrats, they just want more money for public schools so the teachers union and their NGO pals can get school contracts like we talked about yesterday with Scarlett Johnson. That's it. It seems like, does anyone care? No one can read and people can't afford to stay in their houses? Is anybody on the Democrat side motivated by this question at all? Will Flanders, I do appreciate the time on the program today. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.